What was once a cornfield now sits a sprawling campus known as Redemption Christian Church. In small town rural southern Indiana 23 years ago, an upstart church began with a handful of people, and God has grown it to an impactful church of more than 2,000 with campuses in 3 towns. How did this happen? What did God use to not just make a church grow, but create a movement of Christ followers who are brought into the mission of loving God, loving people, and changing the world? This is the Redemption Story, a series of programs in association with Redemption Christian Church and the Kevin R. Smith Company that attempts to tell a bit of the story of what God has done and is doing at and through Redemption Christian Church. Well, my friend, here we are again with a very special guest, someone I know you've talked about a great deal, who helped get Redemption Christian Church of Jasper at that time going, but has meant a whole lot to the worship and the overall culture that you've worked to develop these 20-some years here at Redemption Church.
Absolutely. So Daniel, I don't know, he's visited even in the theater days, and then started attending regularly, I think, at Kathy Lynn Days. Tell us how you came to Redemption, Daniel.
Yeah, so I graduated college at Middle Tennessee State in 2000, and got a job at the old version of the Du Bois County Herald.
When it was really good.
When it was good. No offense. But I got a job there in November of 2000, started the Monday after Thanksgiving, and I grew up in the church, so we immediately started looking for a church, my wife and I. We didn't have any kids at the time, and just started looking anywhere and everywhere. We saw an ad in the paper for a non-denominational Christian church is how it was listed, I think, in an ad in the paper, and I said, let's go check that out, and it was in the movie theater. And I thought, well, that's kind of weird, but we gave it a shot anyway. And then we visited, I think in January of 2001. So we had visited a few other churches. And in January 2001, we visited there. And it was weird. I was correct about
Yes,
that. So my wife, we pulled out of the parking lot, I'll never forget it. She said, let's just keep going there. And I was like, let's keep trying.
Shannon always knows best.
She's usually right. And by usually, I mean always. So, but anyway, we visited around a few other places. And then I think around the summer, maybe around May, right around the first anniversary of the church, I think we started coming on a semi-regular basis back to the theater. And then I remember we were fairly in by the time we went to Kathy Lane, I think. We still were just attending, though, sat in the back. I think in the first service we had in Kathy Lane in the warehouse, we have a picture, and Shannon and I are sitting in the very back of that. So that's how we came, and then I always tell people one sentence changed the course of my life, in that I was in journalism. I was going to be in journalism because I had no idea what was about to happen to journalism, but I went up to Darrell one Sunday, somewhere in the neighborhood of late 2001, early 2002, and said, I play guitar if you ever need me. And I always tell people, I said, he was on me like white on rice.
I was.
White on rice at that point, and he got me together with Jeff Kirby, who has been one of our elders off and on, who played drums, and then things just kind of took off from there.
Was that something you'd been thinking about saying to Darrell, or did it just come up that day?
Yeah, I mean, since we had visited, I didn't consider myself like a great guitar player or anything, but we were singing along to, at the time, CDs, and there was like 4 ladies up front, and somebody'd hit play on the CD, and it would be like live worship recorded in Australia, and there was 20,000 people cheering, and there was 25 of us in the room. And so it just seemed really odd to me, and not, I'm not trying to condemn it or anything, but I just thought, I play guitar. I might be able to be of some use while I'm here. Yeah. So
I think I may have even mentioned at some point from the stage that we were looking for people who played instruments. Too, at that point, because we really were. I always had this vision of where I thought it could go. I just didn't know how to get it there. That's
Didn't know the faces
that's
that
my
were
life.
going to bring
I
in
was
that regard.
like, oh yeah, we could put a park here, but I can't design it, kind of deal, and that's kind of how that that went. So when he said that, I really did grab onto him. I always say I might have hugged him, but I don't know if I did or not, so I don't remember.
Wasn't going to let him go. Right? Only 25 people that day,
So,
right?
yeah.
right.
So tell us a little bit about your musical background prior to and.
Yeah, so I grew up in West Tennessee, and I'll try to not give you my whole life story here, but I grew up in West Tennessee and grew up in a Baptist church there in a town called Paris. We had our own Eiffel Tower and everything. So, and I grew up in a church called Fairview Baptist Church, and my mom led the children's choir. My mom always sang. Her mom always sang. My grandfather on my dad's side played the banjo and played guitar, and so music was just always a part of my life, you know. Sports, and it was sports first, and then around high school I decided I wanted to play guitar, and my parents made me ask for about a year before they finally bought me a guitar, and they bought me an acoustic guitar from our song leader at church, who every time he brought the guitar up, I was always like just enthralled by that, you know. And just loved it. Now, this was back in the day, and our churches back then was piano and organ and a song leader that moved his hand up and down. But when he would bring his guitar out and play, I was like, man, we got something going on now. So I was
Kind of drew you in.
yeah, for sure. And Ronnie Conger was his name, and so we bought my first guitar from him. His cousin gave me lessons for a year, and it was like ragtime type stuff, not stuff that I really wanted to play, but I got the basics down. And so then my sister worked after she graduated high school. She went to Nashville, and she worked at the old Opryland theme park there, if people remember that. And she bought me at one of the gift shops this book that was like 50 great country songbooks. And so it had like just the lead lines for the piano, but it had the chords above it on guitar. And I realized that I knew E, and I knew A, and I knew B. And with those three chords, I could play Boot Scootin' Boogie and Achy Breaky Heart. and so I just strum along with it. And so that's what I did for a while. And then I had friends in high school and stuff like that. And my friend down the street, and he started playing guitar about the same time. And so it was just one of those things, you know, that you kind of latched onto. And then in college, I really kind of started learning how to play well, I guess you would say, something more than just strumming, you know. But that was my background. My mom taught me how to sing harmony and stuff, and how to put the microphone up to my face, because I was always a real shy kid who didn't want to be up in front of people and stuff like that. And like the first, that song leader that I mentioned, Ronnie Conger, he said, you need to be up here and use this for God's glory, you know. And so he had me play my first special music. We called it special music back then. So I just strummed the chords while he played the lap dulcimer, and we played Sweet Hour of Prayer. And then about a year or so later, I played a song where I sang for the first time and played it for the first time. And it's just always one of those core memories that you have, you know. So that's kind of the background of it.
So what do you remember the first chord you ever strummed and the first song for Daryl and CCJ at the time?
The first three songs that we played when we led were Open the Eyes of My Heart, a song called Holiness, I think it was, Take My Life or something like that, and Lord, I Lift Your Name on High. Those are the first three songs we ever played together.
Wow.
So those are kind of good old 90s Christian songs there, you know, that were big in youth groups in the 90s. I think probably. Yeah.
And I went to college in Murfreesboro, Tennessee, and I lived in Nashville, so I kind of did this triangle of Murfreesboro, Nashville, Franklin, because I worked in Franklin. And the church that we went to was a church called Lighthouse Baptist Church. You can see it from I-24. It was heavily damaged by the flood in 2010, but that's the church we went to. So in our what we called cell groups back then, they were like our community groups. We sang, and it was really, really, really super awkward because there was like 8 people sitting in somebody's living room. It's like, let's sing together, you know. But they needed somebody to play along, you know. So I told them I just strummed, and so I think those 3 songs were songs that we did from that church too. So,
Wow.
so
Great,
that's
great
kind
memory.
of that era. Yeah, I remember a lot of minutia that doesn't
No,
get me anywhere.
it's good stuff. It's all part of the heritage and the legacy. And you know, as you look today, you have a number of bands playing at all the campuses, and you intermix with the talents and things. But as you reflect back from today to that startup, what's something you think stands out on perhaps a consistent aspect that you've learned, taken away, and it still resides with you and the music worship team today?
Yeah, I think number one is just why we're doing it. We're here to bring glory to God and to encourage the people to sing together to bring glory to God. And I always tell people, like when we hear the congregation singing, especially at Jasper campus, I always tell people that's been like a 20-something year project, you know, because Du Bois County is not known for being expressive or anything like that. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it's just not known for.
We're reserved for sure.
It's known for being reserved, and so I think helping people understand what it means to sing and to make a joyful noise for God's glory has been there from the beginning. I remember we had a lady in the early days, Paula, who came from a more charismatic background. She would get real frustrated, I think, because the people just weren't singing, you know, and it was different for me too. I mean, because from where I came from, everybody sang, whether you could or not. It was a different story, but everybody sang, you know, and you sang loud, you know. You just it wasn't super like hand raising or anything like that, but we all sang. And so when I got here, I was a little taken aback by that. But I think that's been there from the beginning. I think something we've had for a long time, maybe not from the word go, but is trying to have musical diversity to serve a wide variety of people, to serve, you know, a diverse church. We've always had that in mind. And so, yeah, I think those are some of those things that we've carried from the beginning on.
Well, to build off that a little bit, you said when your song leader at your home church picked up the guitar, like it drew you in.
Yeah.
So there was a young guy that was drawn in by somebody doing something really real diversity from what they were used to. And so we've always kind of taken that approach with our music too, because it's going to reach and draw and grab somebody and pull them in. And there's nothing wrong with having preferences either. But I always say, you know, the words are the words no matter what style we're singing. So I'm going to sing along with them.
And I think that speaking that musical language, I know you guys have talked about it before, speaking the musical language of the culture is important. Because I always say, you know, if you're going to go be a missionary in Mexico, you better know how to speak Spanish, right? So if you're going to be a musical missionary, so to speak, you better be able to speak some sort of the dialect that the people around you are speaking musically. So, we've carried that along.
So I know in discussions and through previous episodes of the Redemption Story with Daryl, a lot of pride in how the musical worship has grown over the years. And I sense that when we see you on Sunday mornings and even watching the replays come out in your voice and with the team around you on the stage in that piece. Thinking back after you told Daryl, hey, if you need somebody that can play a guitar, here I am. How did you all align expectations, or where did that start? Did you just take it and run with it, or did you and Daryl have a couple of discussions to kind of figure out where you were going to start and what the end in mind might look like?
I think all along the way, it's been a team effort. I don't think it's ever just been like, here, you take it and run with it. It's always been a conversation for 20-something years. And that's something that I know that I'm appreciative of because, you know, I hear other worship ministers talking about their relationship with their senior minister. And a lot of times it's one of tension, you know, it's one of doing this. I want this and he wants this. And I think we've had a good relationship all along the way of learning what's best for the church. And I think we both have that goal in mind. What's going to glorify God and what's going to encourage his people the most, you know.
You know, just thinking back before we get too far away from what led you to the church in the beginning, how many times have you told your wife how much she's been right about that after the first visit in your marriage? Multiple?
Well, yeah, I mean, I've told this story on more than one occasion. So I would say for a long time, you know, without getting too deep into it, our families aren't from here. You know, we're transplants, and it's just us. Like, we don't have any extended family anywhere close to us. Like, I think our closest family is 3 hours away, and like her side of the family is 8 hours away. So a lot of times when I would tell that story, you know, she'd be like, yeah, it was tinged with a little bit of, and that's what kept us here, you know. But I think she's come around on that over the years, and God's really worked in our lives to help us see why we're here. So yeah, I've told that story many times, and you know, she's always right in every story I tell. So.
Well, and that whole not having family close piece, really, I would say their family, and it was just Daniel and Shannon in the early days, were really always a motivator for me for the importance of small groups. Because I looked at people that didn't have close family around, so, you know, extended grandparents came from within the church, babysitters came from within the church, and so it was always a motivation for me to understand the importance of, if you're really going to grow a community in small groups, is an essential part of that.
Yeah, for instance, yesterday was my oldest daughter's 21st birthday. So she was born in this church, and then she's grown up, and now she works here as well part-time. And I was thinking about Angie Day, our administrative director, but Angie was basically their aunt, for lack of a better term. She took care of them a lot when they were growing up, and you know, always she was our go-to for, like, hey, we need to go out of town, or we need a date night, or we need just a couple hours away from kids or whatever. And and Angie was in our community group at the time, and we've had other people in our community group at the time. So they really, during those pivotal eras of, like, especially when our kids were little and stuff like that, the community group really was our family. So.
Thank you for sharing that. So much value there, and very much from what Daryl spoke on in a number of our episodes previously. Daryl, thinking back to the startup, here's this man who may have had hair back then. We don't know, right? He had a lot of hair back then.
No facial hair, lots of hair on top.
We're trying to figure out how we keep getting this speakers and guests without hair. We've got to work on that aspect. But when you think back, and here's Daniel beginning this music worship and the process and program, had to be a number of challenges. Talk a little bit about what impressed you with how he met those challenges and some of the patience and for lack of a better word, the management of stress that led to the success.
Well, I always call Daniel a unicorn because typically people in the worship arts, which is what they call them in a lot of the college world, the collegiate world, the worship art, they're typically not organizationally driven. They're more the arts-driven people. And so it's hard to find somebody that's really, or used to be anyway, it may not be as much anymore, who's really driven to do the structural side of it. And so to find Daniel early on, and him obviously be with the journalistic background, English, and obviously all that stuff, along with the music side of things, really was just a crucial key linchpin to what we saw the worship ministry becoming. And really more than that, because when we actually hired him to come on board, even part-time, communications was that piece. It was worship and communications. And so anyway, that was, I think, really the big thing that I knew I had the right person in that role, that God had brought us the right person. And I was always inspired, and I can't even remember the guy's name, and I'm not trying to compare myself to Billy Graham, but Billy Graham always had his worship guy with him all the way, and I always thought, this is a crucial piece. If you're going to do evangelistic ministry, where you're drawing people in, you need those two pieces really, really important. And so even before we got deep into kids ministry, that was important to us. So he was a great part of that, continues to be. And, I know it can be said because it's the whole team, but we wouldn't be here without God sending us Daniel, somebody like Daniel. So it's important.
Ever been a question that that you made a mistake hooking up with this guy from the get-go?
No, but I mean, that's why I always tell people, and, you know, maybe a little dramatic in my retelling, but I always say, my life really did take a 90-degree right turn when I said to him, I play guitar if you ever need me. Because just in hindsight, you see what happened with that. Because, I mean, our plan, and I think he told this on a previous podcast, but my plan, I didn't know Jasper, Indiana existed. I mean, I knew Indiana existed. My mom was actually born in Indiana, Hoosier native. But we moved up here just to get a year of experience under my belt so that I could go somewhere else. And when I said that to him, I mean, it just one thing after another, after another, after another. And, you know, I always say 1 year turned into, now we're on year 24 here, so.
It's a lifetime that goes by
That's
really
right,
quick,
really
right?
quick.
So but before we wrap up this episode, and I think you're going to allow him to stick around.
Yeah, can you
right?
stay for another episode?
Yeah.
Sure.
For another than that piece, how long did it take him to contact you after you made that piece? Was it during the same conversation?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, he told me, I don't remember everything about the conversation, but I do remember him telling me that Jeff Kirby played drums and that we had some other people, and so he had a plan in his mind, and I could tell that it was these pieces were starting to fit together a little bit, so it was good to be a part of that.
We're not sure if the Beatles or the Eagles or anybody like that started that way, but this is how
the
the
way it
musical
happened.
worship
It
started.
usually
at
happens
Redemption.
randomly, yeah, that's right.
Well, listen, we appreciate you speaking for the entire church and the community. What a blessing you are for Daryl and the team, and what a combination the two of you are. And we'd like to dive in more and hear some lessons learned. I'm sure there's been some things that haven't worked, whether somebody unplugging a chord or forgetting an instrument. In
I wish that
piece.
was all that it was.
Well, thank you for joining us, and Daryl, thank you again.
Yep.
I feel blessed.
Thank you.